Well, good morning, everybody. I just want to start again today with looking at the satellite imagery from yesterday. I love looking at this imagery, and it's showing us that deeper wave that's over the Four Corner states and all of the convection out ahead of it. I know a lot of folks are out here chasing these storms, and what was most important about them is where they put down rain. This finally brought moisture back, close to the front range, along the front range here in a very drought-stricken part of the country. And as we just kind of look back yesterday at some of the other events going on across the country here, we've got this kind of larger scale, it's almost synoptic scale low that's sitting down here over parts of the south. That's going to be important for the moisture that's going to continue to hit this region. And you can also see here in the northeast, the smoke. Again, all week long, we've seen the smoke from the wildfires last weekend in Alberta coming across parts of New England and Ontario and Quebec. And then overnight, you can see in the infrared just the size of those storms and the deep low that's just crossing over the Four Corner states here. And then as we get into this morning, we just saw the sunrise here on what's going on this morning. So we'll take a look at where this is going to go later today. But again, take a look at all the smoke that's over here. Now, the moisture that was returned to this particular part of the country, talking about Colorado and this part of Nebraska and Kansas. Yes, there was a lot of hail with this, but we did see some places get their first kind of meaningful rain in a very long time. A lot of places in here are easily picking up, over an inch of precipitation. Now, that's not to ignore other places around the country at all. We just know that we're really battling drought in the midsection of the United States. So we're just kind of taking this all in. We had a lot of severe storms that made it up here in the Canadian Prairie, dotted throughout parts of Montana, Wyoming, and here in the upper Midwest. And we've seen heavy rains come out of that low that slowly moved out of Texas here over to Arkansas. Now, Texas is going to be the target over the next several days through this weekend for extremely heavy rain. We'll get back to that in just a few seconds. But I want to talk briefly about the hail because we're going to add, these are the reports from yesterday. Look, you can see right up here hugging the front range of the Rockies, several of these storms putting down some very large hail. Now, looking back over the last 3 days, just wanted to show you my latest map. This goes from the 8th to this morning, looking at where radar picked up on hail signatures. And so a lot of what came in here, these relieving rains, did unfortunately put down quite a bit of hail. And I've seen several pictures and reports of crops really being damaged by this and probably forcing a replant. Now, if we take a look at today's all hazards weather map, it's been a long time since I've seen this shade of color in these areas. This is where we're looking at flood risk here. Same thing down here. But the thing that I think we're really going to have to pay attention to is the evolution of this pattern that's driving this excessive heat watch here that's in part of the Pacific Northwest along the I-5 corridor through the parts of the Willamette Valley up to the Puget Sound. And I think we better start by just going to the upper levels of the atmosphere and seeing, where this whole pattern is really going. So you can see the shortwave right in through here that's ejecting later today. And this is going to continue to set us up with another 3 days of active severe weather in the midsection of the country. But this trough is not progressing. It's not coming into the northwest, this guy right here. And instead, as we play this forward, it hangs out in the Gulf of Alaska while that large high over low setup takes place. And what this is going to do is this is going to pump a tremendous amount of heat into the Canadian Prairie, into Western Canada and the Pacific Northwest by this weekend, while the low that's to the south of it's going to draw that moisture into New Mexico and Arizona and Texas. And this is going to be the area that's going to be quite wet. As we watch through the weekend now into early next week, that ridge really stays around. This whole split flow idea with one piece of the jet going north, another piece going to the south here is what keeps the west very split on the heat north, the cooler conditions and wetter conditions in the southwest. But there will be drier air that comes in on the back side of this, right in through this area here, cutting into much of the Midwest, getting over into New England, where it will be a little bit cooler than normal as well. Now, this pattern we see here going out to like May 18th and 19th, if we were to see this particular pattern in middle of summer, it would give us a much different result on the precipitation, especially in the Canadian Prairie and Midwest, than it's going to give us here in May. We've talked a lot about that this week. This flow coming out of the northwest, which you just follow the contour lines and you'll see where the mid-level flow is, that would generally promote in summer quite a bit more thunderstorm activity here. But in spring, it's still convergent, and as a result, we're going to see a drier forecast. So how long does this last? Well, we're just playing this out here all the way out into week 2. So this would be the day 10 forecast. Still very similar, position of the jet stream here. As we even go beyond that out here to the 23rd and 24th, we just see the atmosphere favoring that overall setup, more ridging to the west of the United States. All right, today's severe weather outlook, this was released this morning from the Storm Prediction Center. They've got a large area in Kansas and Oklahoma. We're watching carefully, but storms all throughout the plains in this area today. Tomorrow it just budges a little bit farther to the east. You can start to see the drier air coming into this part of Kansas. And then we get into the day here on this will be the 13th, Saturday. And again, we're going to watch a couple of different corridors here, all from this same wave that's ejecting. Now, we stitched it all together, and we've been really using this WPC map a lot. I think it's captured the pattern well as to what to expect, but what we've got going on here is much of this right now is coming from the wave that's ejecting out of the Four Corner states. And then what we add into Texas this weekend is part of the split flow. If you're east of this area, there's a lot of regions here that are going to see scattered storms, but there will be places that do get missed. And I know you see holes right in through here and holes in this section. I'll be honest, the models will kind of flip-flop a lot on who gets moisture in these areas. This is just the National Weather Service, the Weather Prediction Center, their kind of best attempt at trying to figure out where the moisture is going to go. But we all struggle with this pattern. And the reason why is because the flow is weak. Okay, this is what the jet stream looks like today. There's actually 3 different areas of spin I want you to watch, and it doesn't even include this monster. Here's the main wave. Here's the leading wave. There's actually a secondary shortwave right here. In fact, there's 4. There's another one moving through the upper Midwest and Northern Plains. So you can see that when I play out the high-res NAM 1, 2, 3, and 4. As we play throughout the day today, there's all of the scattered storms associated with each of those shortwaves. So we'll just kind of rock back and forth throughout this afternoon and this evening. So this will be another situation where we'll now cast our way through it to see where the storms are going to be. But clearly the Storm Prediction Center has identified a lot of the plains as having risk over the next couple of days. So playing through the overnight hours, getting into Friday morning. This is Friday midday, and then eventually into Friday evening. Notice how on Friday the models are trying to kick off a lot of severe weather in Texas. We still have 2 of those shortwaves moving through the northern plains. And then playing into the day on Saturday, we're still not, kind of scrunching out this big area of open Gulf moisture. So there's just going to be a lot of scattered convection with this particular setup. Now, when does that drier air invade? Well, we'll go back to our precipitable water map. The higher the value, the more juice is in the atmosphere. So I'm particularly thinking about this plume of Gulf moisture into this area. So as we play it forward, this is getting through the day on Friday. And then here comes another pulse on Saturday and Sunday. Now watch. Here's the first push early Monday morning of some drier air coming in. And what's going on here is this is when the big ridge is setting up here over the northwest and the western parts of Canada. And this is the drier air that's coming in around the trough that's setting up over parts of Ontario and Quebec. So you can really see that flow quite well by how much drier air is getting kind of suppressed and pushed farther to the south here. But where the flow splits, ridge west, trough over the southwest, this is the type of moisture that the atmosphere is pulling in. And at any given moment, we're seeing these values, way up here in the 1 to 2 inch range in terms of precipitable water. So let's go to the high-res European model to kind of play this out. We're going to start midday today. We've already seen through Friday and then into Saturday. Now again, system to the north, frontal boundary stretching from Kentucky over here to North Carolina, Virginia. But watch the moisture this weekend. This is Saturday evening, getting into Sunday. A lot of isolated storms in this region here on Sunday morning possible. But it just is so persistent down here into Texas through the weekend. Now here comes the higher pressure with the drier air next week, and that's going to force some wet weather to move through parts of the Carolinas. And we need this moisture over here. There was some scattered storms earlier this week, in fact, a big one near Greenville that produced some very large hail. But this is going to clear things out a bit. So we get out there to Wednesday and Thursday of next week, and we just really see the pattern kind of shifting back away from the really wet conditions and over toward keeping it all isolated, or mostly confined, I should say, down into Texas. So let's kind of look at these maps. I really enjoy looking at these because I think they really just distill down the pattern quite simply. Next 10 days, here's the probability of getting an inch of total precipitation. So everywhere that you see this shade of color, that's between 90 and 100%. This is the probability of getting 2 inches. So very heavy precip here, and this includes some of the storms last night because this is the 0Z run. Here's the probability of 4 inches, and I just want to point out we could have places in Texas that easily eclipse 4 inches in total precip. Now, what did those recent rains do, and what will these rains coming up, let's go back to the 1 inch number, overall do to the pattern? Because we're still very concerned about the drought situation that is in the midsection of the country. We have eroded away at the 16-inch or 40-centimeter soil moisture percentile maps from NASA, but there are still pockets in through here that were missed and may continue to be missed as we go forward. So these will be the areas we'll continue to talk about. And I look at this and I just see how much moisture fell around it, and it feels quite unfair to not see the moisture getting into certain places here in the plains that desperately need it. But if we look at what the week 2 forecast is going to hold for us, this is where we bring in the drier air north. You can see it in all 3 models, while the wettest conditions sit on that split flow to the south, right here in the Four Corner States and Southwest. Now from there, let's slide down and take a look at the national report and go to the temperature maps, because you can see the heat that's building in over the next 5 days, day 5 through 10, day 10 through 15, while some cooler weather starts to slide into the east. Now I say cooler, there's no frost risk with this, but we are seeing exceptional heat coming into the west. So to show you what that frost risk looks like, we still have some patchy high elevation frost here and then throughout the mountains in the west. But outside of that, we're not looking at a frost over the next 7 days. And we could still see them this time of year in the northern plains, but thankfully this pattern's not allowing that to happen. So what are the temperatures doing? Here's today's highs going into Friday and Saturday. Watch the heat build here in the I-5 corridor, the Willamette Valley getting up to Puget Sound. And what we have on Sunday, this is all rain-cooled air in through this region. Getting into Monday, in fact, Sunday might be the hottest one, 95, 92, very hot conditions there. And then we go into early next week, and the heat just stays on in the northwest. It's cooler in Texas simply due to the cloud cover. And if we stitch it together and say, what do the next 7 days hold in terms of GDDs? We're still packing these things in pretty efficiently in this quarter, and they're going to really add them up in the Pacific Northwest going forward. All right, last few things to talk about. Here's that 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies. We already got a glimpse at this. You notice that the European model looks very similar to what I showed you with the GFS just a moment ago. So we do end up getting some cooler air in that broader trough here, cloud and rain-cooled air down here in the southwest. But the heat is on in the Canadian Prairie to western Canada and certainly in the western United States as we play all the way out to the 26th of May. Okay, last couple things I want to talk about. With that ridge coming into the west, we will likely see a major shift in these ocean temperatures. And, we've been concerned about the PDO. We're going to talk about this in the in-depth report tonight. But just to show you what's been going on here, I pulled this off one of my favorite sites, Tropical Tidbits. Just in the last week alone, we've seen a pretty substantial warming of the ocean temperatures right here. And that warming is expected to continue as the ridge really builds into the west, clears it out, brings in the heat, lets the sun beat down on this, and we're going to see a lot of change in that PDO signal going forward. Our El Nino, though, is continuing to strengthen down here, and that's going to be the context again tonight. Last couple things to talk about. In Europe, we've seen a bit of a shift in the temperature pattern. We're much cooler in Central Europe now. The Iberian Peninsula is no longer under the massive heat wave. Some warmth moving over here into this part of Western Russia, Eastern Europe, including Ukraine. They need some warmth in this area. But the 10-day outlook globally for precipitation, it is wet in that corridor, right in through here. And they'd be very happy to see some isolated storms getting into the Iberian Peninsula. But I want to draw your attention down to South America. Very dry after what had been just a phenomenal season for the safrinha crop. I'm not sure it's going to negatively impact the northern part of it, but maybe some later planted stuff in the south could, because we're going to see warm temperatures in here as well. So we'll just keep you up to date on. I'll talk to some of you again tonight in the in-depth report, and the rest of you will talk in the morning. Thanks.